Iran is now producing uranium that will approach weapons grade. Think nuclear bomb. I'm Randall Terry. This is Voice of Resistance.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance.
Welcome to the broadcast, friend. On Sunday, there was a fire in one of the nuclear facilities in Iran. Iran is blaming Israel, and as of right now, Israel has made no comment whatsoever as to whether or not they were involved, if they were involved with a joint project with, say, the Saudis, because the Saudis don't want the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon. Why is that? Quick background. By the way, this look is because I am playing a part in a movie this summer and I have to have long hair like an old rock and roller. For those of you who don't know, I have a master's degree from Norwich University, which is one of the oldest military schools in the country, and my degree is in international terrorism. It is a concentration in international terrorism. It's a diplomacy, foreign relations master's. An enormous amount of my research has been spent on Islamic terrorism. Why would the Saudis not want the Iranians to have a nuclear weapon? And why would the Israelis not want? Well, it's the same answer, but let's start with the Saudis. Iranians are predominantly Shiite. The Saudis are predominantly Sunnis. Sunni Muslims and Shiite Muslims have been at war since the dawn of Islam. Sunnis believe that a caliph, a successor to Muhammad with his authority but not his prophetic office, as they call it, that a khalifa, the successor, can be anybody. And so when Muhammad died, he did not leave, at least according to some people, he did not leave explicit instructions as to who would succeed him. So his first three caliphs, his first three successors, were not blood relatives. The fourth was a blood relative named Ali. So there was a party of Ali, Shia al-Ali, the party of Ali that believed he was the only legitimate heir and that it should have been a dynastic succession, such as a king of England. It should have been a bloodline in the succession of successors. And the Sunnis say, no, that's not true. Well, civil war broke out in Islam between the Sunnis and the Shiites, and that civil war has continued on and off to this day. The Shiites have been on the receiving end of much of the oppression because they have generally only made up about 15% of the Muslim population worldwide. And that number has held through the centuries. The Sunnis feel like, hey, we can have anybody who's a successor that we want, and you people are fanatics, you're maniacs, and Muhammad said that parties were bad things, and so that's why they nicknamed them Shia al-Ali. It's a slur. To be a Shiite from a Sunni point of view is actually a slur. And there are Sunni Muslims who have said that they hate Christianity, they hate Judaism. The only thing they hate more are Shiites because they represent a threat to the ongoing Sunni power structure. All right. However, the Pakistanis have a nuclear weapon. They are a Sunni nation. The Saudis helped the Pakistanis with funding and with research, helped the Pakistanis to get a nuclear weapon. And there is sufficient evidence to believe that the Saudis could just submit a chit, a due bill, to the Pakistanis and say, okay, we need some nuclear weapons. Israel has nuclear weapons. They are the only Middle Eastern power right now with nuclear weapons on the ground. Iraq would have had nuclear weapons, but under Menachem Begin back in the early 80s, the Israelis flew 4 jets into Iraq and blew up the nuclear facility that was in the process of building nuclear weapons, and Saddam Hussein never went back at it. All right. The Jews don't want the Shiites, the Iranians, to have a nuclear weapon because it is a part of Islamic philosophy, ideology, theology, eschatology that Israel will be destroyed. They say it in different words, but it all stems back from Muhammad saying at the end, a rock will cry out, "There is a Jew hiding behind me." A tree will cry out, "There is a Jew hiding behind me. Come and kill him, O Abdullah." Abdullah means servant of Allah. So the Jews have heard people, including leaders of Iran, say that it's just a matter of time until they wipe Israel off the face of the earth. Now, let me take a break because I'm over on my time. When we come back, we'll discuss the history of weaponry in the hands of peaceful Islamic nations. I'll be right back. Welcome back, friend. So here's the issue. In Christian theology, the theory of just war is that, among other things, you try and do as little collateral damage as possible. You try to not kill non-combatants. In Islamic theology, you have Dar al-Harb and Dar al-Islam. That means Dar al-Harb means the house of war. Dar al-Islam means the house of surrender. People who have surrendered. Islam means surrender or submission. That's literally what the word means. So you have the house of surrender. Those are the nations that have submitted their knee, bowed their knee to the will of Allah as expressed in the life and commandments of Muhammad. Dar al-Harb is the house of war. Those nations that have not submitted to Islam, have not submitted to the dictates of Muhammad. In the house of war, everyone is a combatant. So the indiscriminate killing has been a part of Islamic history. That's why when they blew up the trade tower, I mean, these are non-combatants. But when they blew up the Twin Towers, we would look at it and go, why would you blow up a civilian facility? To them, they're saying, hey, you're the Dar al-Harb, you're the house of war. And we're killing combatants because the whole infidel world is at war with Islam, and Islam is at war with the infidel world. So forget Saudi Arabia, forget Israel. Us, Western nations, we have a vested interest in keeping nuclear weapons out of the hands of the Iranians. And that was President Trump's policy, that we were not going to let Iran get a nuclear weapon. Now, John Kerry, with his pathetic role as Secretary of State under Obama and John Kerry paved the way for Iran to get a nuclear weapon in 10 to 15 years. And this was supposed to make us happy. They're a patient nation. Okay, they've been around for a long time. Patient nation. And Trump said, no, these people are a threat, and it is going to be a part of our policy to not permit them to get a nuclear weapon, period. Because if they get it, here's the next part of where their theology and their military theory meet. Muhammad said over and over that when somebody dies a shaheed, which is Arabic for martyr or witness, all right? From our origin of our language, the word martyr also means witness. We think of someone who was killed for the testimony of their faith. In Islamic ideology, a shaheed, a martyr, is someone who dies facing their enemy. So it's a military conflict, And Muhammad said, as long as you die facing the enemy, you're not retreating in fear, but you're facing the enemy, he said, you will go immediately to paradise. He said that when you stand before God, your wounds will appear as they were when you died, but the blood will not smell like blood. It will be the fragrance of musk, a cologne, an aphrodisiac cologne, an aphrodisiac scent. So here's where Muhammad was mixing his sexual promises with his promises of heaven, and hence the idea that a shaheed, someone who dies in battle facing the enemy, can go to heaven and have virgins with whom they can have all kinds of sexual escapades. All right. If you've got the incentive not to just kill, but to die, one of the reasons that the Muslim armies were so fanatical and really on a military level won some pretty intense battles where you wouldn't think that they would win, but it's because they didn't care if they died. It's like the cornered rat, you know what I'm saying? That if you corner a rat, it will fight. Not to compare Muslim soldiers to rats, the issue is that they were willing to plunge into battle, lunge themselves into battle, because they think, if I win, I get the spoils of war, I might get a sex slave out of this. If I lose, I'm going to go to heaven and I'm going to get a sex slave. And God's going to reward me with my blood smelling like musk. That's a really dangerous thing when you wed that with a nuclear weapon. So let's just say, for point of discussion, that a Muslim nation decided that it was going to use a nuclear weapon against Israel. What's the theological payoff if that nation, in response to their attack on Israel, that nation has a nuclear military strike against it? I'll take a break and I'll explain it when we come back. Let's see if you can just guess. Don't go away. Welcome back, friend. So if you really believed Islam, I mean really believed it, and you're in Tehran, you're one of the leaders of the Shiites, and you think, holy smokes, I could get a nuclear weapon or 2 or 5 or 10. I could destroy Israel. And then when the great Satan America attacks us, because we would, maybe we die in a nuclear holocaust. Maybe we get killed. But we get to go to heaven and have all kinds of sex slaves in heaven. So let me get this straight. I kill the Jews and I get to be in heaven? I'll take that deal. That's the danger of having these weapons in the hands of people that really believe the promises of Muhammad. Now, I will grant you it's on a much larger scale, but if you read the biography of Muhammad, the actual canonical biography written by Ibn Ishaq, we see again and again people who, at the behest of Muhammad, threw themselves into battle wherein they would die, and they knew they would die, but they did so based upon Muhammad's promise to them that they were going to be with him in paradise, that they were going to be bejeweled with great riches and springs of water and wide-eyed virgins. They believed it. They fought for it. They died for it. So people who read it and believe it today, well, in America and in other nations around the world, we've seen supposedly moderate, peaceful Muslims go to becoming terrorists. They don't view themselves as terrorists. They view themselves as shaheed, as witnesses, as martyrs. That's why the idea, the notion that somebody has to go to a foreign country to be radicalized is so stupid. And one of the great treacheries of the Obama administration was the instructions to the FBI that they were not allowed to look at the religious material that persons of interest were reading as a means of profiling them, whether or not they would become terrorists. Now, if somebody is exploring Christianity and they're just poring over the Gospels, poring over the book of Acts, and they're thinking about becoming an evangelist or going as a missionary to a foreign country or maybe becoming a monk or whatever, preacher, pastor, priest, whatever your denomination is. If you look at what someone is reading and they're spending hours online studying these things, you think to yourself, all right, they're on a track to go into the ministry. They're on a track to have some kind of a serious conversion. If you see somebody who's reading Al-Tabari or Ibn Ishaq or the canonical Hadith, Sahih Muslim, Sahih Bukhari, that would say to you, just as a, step back and look, that would say to you, wow, this person is really thinking about becoming a devout Muslim. And the more they study the first generation of Islam, where Islam conquered the Saudi Arabian peninsula by unthinkable violence and treachery and rape and murder, literally, then you would say, uh-oh, this person is reading the literature that has inspired other people to become shaheed, to become witnesses. We would call them terrorists. They would just call themselves devout followers of Muhammad. And the FBI was told by the Obama people, you may not look at what religious material they're reading. So if they got a pamphlet from a terrorist organization, Al-Qaeda, big print, Al-Qaeda, then we can look at them. But if all the content of that Al-Qaeda pamphlet comes straight from the Quran or the Hadith or the biography by Ibn Ishaq, then no, they're just reading about Muhammad. We can't judge. We can't assume that would lead to anything, even though various terrorists in America are referencing and quoting from the materials that I'm discussing. I've got to take a break. Please don't go away. Welcome back, friend. We're talking about just the tip of the iceberg here. If you find this of interest, there's a phone number there on the screen. Go ahead and call it. You can order one of two things. One is a 90-minute documentary called Muhammad in His Own Words, and it is the distilled research of my master's degree. For those of you who want to be far more in-depth students, you can order What Would Muhammad Do? That is 4 DVDs. It is 20 episodes of material from the life of Muhammad and solely from what are considered the canonical sources of Islam. In other words, if you're a Muslim, if you're a Sunni Muslim, these are theological resources that you are required to believe. You are required to believe the Quran is the word of God, and Ibn Ishaq's biography of the prophet, they call it, and Al-Tabari is one of the most revered historical sources, but Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, those two collections of hadith are considered canonical. The hadith are the words of Muhammad that are not in the Quran. The Quran is considered to be just the word of God. The hadith is the record of the words of Muhammad. And the Quran is a very small book. The hadith are 10 times the size of the Quran. But in Islamic theology and in Islamic philosophy, you take the Quran and then you look to Muhammad's example, because the Quran says that Muhammad is the perfect example of a servant of God. So, what did Muhammad do? What did Muhammad say? Hence, what would Muhammad do? That's the name of the series. So if you want to understand Islam, you've got to study not just the Quran, you've got to study the Hadith. You've got to study the biography. And those together form what we call, and they call, Sharia law. Sharia. That's Islamic law. Islamic law is not simply the Quran, it's the Quran with the example left by Muhammad. Go to the phone number that you see, call and order What Would Muhammad Do? Or Muhammad in his own words, and you will know more than most of the idiots in our State Department. Get a copy for you and for your pastor. God bless you. Till next time.